The US and Iran are currently involved in a bitter war. It might be hard to believe today that both the countries shared a very close relationship in the past, and Iran was a close ally of the US during the Cold War. So what happened that they became sworn enemies of each other? To understand this, we have to go back to the mid-19th century, when Persia, as Iran was then called, was caught in the great game between the British and Russian empires. Back then, the Persians viewed the US as a more trustworthy foreign power. In August 1941, during the peak of the World War II, the British and the Soviet Union occupied Iran to prevent its takeover by Nazi Germany. They also wanted to prevent Germany from reaching the Persian Gulf. In 1943, the British and the USSR, along with the US, issued the Tehran Declaration, which guaranteed independence to Iran after the end of the World War II. However, after the end of the war, Joseph Stalin, the leader of the USSR, refused to relinquish occupied Iranian territory despite repeated assurances. The USSR finally relented under immense pressure by the US, withdrawing the Red Army from Iran in May 1946. This was one of the first incidents in the Cold War and made Iran a battleground between the US and the Soviet Union. Iran at that time was a semi-constitutional monarchy and ruled by the Pahlavi dynasty. Mohammad Reza Pahlavi was appointed as the Shah, or the King, of Iran by the British in 1941. In 1951, the National Front led by Mohammad Mossadegh won the elections to Iran's Senate, and he was elected the Prime Minister of Iran. Soon after taking office, his government nationalized the Iranian oil industry, including the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. The British government was alarmed by this decision. They were worried that Iran was being overrun by communist ideology. Fearing that Iran might become a Soviet ally, British Prime Minister, Churchill approached the U.S. President, Dwight Eisenhower, to help overthrow Iran's government. The CIA played an instrumental role in the 1953 coup that ousted the government of Mohammad Mossadegh. After his dismissal, the Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, who was viewed more favorably by the U.S., assumed full powers. Under Shah's rule, Iran received substantial financial and military support from the U.S. The U.S. also helped establish Shah's brutal secret police, called SAVAK, to maintain control over the people. However, Shah's autocratic rule soon led to discontent among the Iranian masses. People felt American companies were looting Iran's oil wealth, and the Shah was complicit in this plunder. Any dissent was brutally repressed, and political activists were arrested and jailed without trial. Eventually, the people of Iran revolted and ousted the Shah. The popular movement was led by staunch anti-American Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. The Shah of Iran was given refuge by the U.S., which was opposed by Islamic revolutionaries. In response, they seized the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and held 52 American diplomats hostage for 444 days. This led to irreparable deterioration of the U.S.-Iran relationship. The U.S. retaliated by imposing sanctions on Iran. The American hostages were released in 1981 after the signing of Algiers Accords. While the hostage crisis was going on, war had broken out between Iran and Iraq in September 1980. The ruler of Iraq, Saddam Hussein, was worried that the Iranian Revolution might provoke Shia Muslims of Iraq to revolt against him. He also wanted greater control over the waters of the Persian Gulf. Hence, he invaded Iran in September 1980. The war continued for the next 8 years, till 1988. In this war, the U.S. provided support to Iraq through sharing of intelligence and defense equipment, training Iraqi military personnel, and economic aid, which further harmed the U.S.-Iran relationship. A little after the Iran-Iraq War ended, Ayatollah Khomeini died in 1989. But by then, he had embedded anti-Americanism deep into the Iranian governance system. One such lever was the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or the IRGC, which was established by Khomeini to preserve the Islamic Revolution. IRGC has been central to curb all the dissenting voices and protests against the regime that have erupted periodically since 1979. Ali Khamenei took over the role of supreme leader in 1989, and under his leadership the relationship with the U.S. remained fraught, mainly over the issues related to Iran's nuclear program, human rights abuses in Iran, and support to non-state actors like Hezbollah and Hamas. Iran has propped up such groups as part of its strategy of asymmetric warfare against Israel. Elimination of Israel as an independent state is a core component of Iran's foreign policy. This was the main reason the U.S. President, George Bush, labeled Iran as the axis of evil in 2002. The U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003 and the subsequent fall of Saddam Hussein inadvertently elevated Iran as the dominant regional power by eliminating Iran's biggest rival. Iran filled the power vacuum in Iraq by funding Shia militias which were detrimental to U.S. interests. Even under these adverse circumstances, the diplomatic efforts to check Iran's nuclear program continued under the Obama administration. This diplomacy resulted in the U.S. successfully negotiating a nuclear deal with Iran in 2015. The EU, Russia, and China were also part of this deal. The agreement placed substantial limits on Iran's nuclear program, including IAEA inspections and limitations on uranium enrichment levels. In return, the sanctions on Iran were lifted in 2016. However, the Trump administration unilaterally withdrew from the nuclear agreement and reimposed sanctions in 2018. In response, Iran restarted its nuclear enrichment program, and by 2024 had achieved 60% enrichment of uranium, against a threshold of 90% required for a nuclear weapon. The U.S. intelligence believed that Iran was quite close to developing a nuclear bomb. Citing this possibility, the U.S. and Israel launched strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities in June 2025. Though the U.S. claimed that Iran's nuclear plants were obliterated, several experts believed that Iran had already moved its enriched uranium elsewhere, and it wasn't destroyed in the strikes. Israel's military action in Gaza and Lebanon after the October 7th terrorist attacks had considerably weakened Hamas and Hezbollah. Iran had also lost its ally in Syria after the ouster of Bashar al-Assad in December 2024. Moreover, Russia, which has been Iran's staunch supporter, has been embroiled in the Ukraine war since 2022. Both U.S. and Israel realized that Russia is not in a position to militarily support Iran. In addition, there were widespread street protests against the Islamic regime in Iran in December 2025 and January 2026. The U.S. and Israeli intelligence felt that the regime has become widely unpopular, and the Iranian people are willing to overthrow the government if they are provided external support. The IRGC violently crushed the protests, killing almost 3,000 people, though other estimates say this number is underreported. All these factors together made the Islamic regime in Iran the weakest it has been since 1979. These considerations were central to American and Israeli military calculus to launch a full-scale war against Iran on February 28, 2026. President Trump has given varying statements regarding the U.S. war objectives in Iran. Many experts believe that the Trump administration wants a regime change to install a more favorable government serving American interests and posing no threat to Israel. Others argue that Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu pressured President Trump to enter this war to eliminate Israel's biggest adversary in the region. President Trump has repeatedly said that the U.S. forces have completely obliterated Iran's military capabilities. Yet, the Iranian government hasn't capitulated, and regime change looks increasingly unlikely. The blockade of the Strait of Hormuz and its grave economic impact on global energy supply chains have strengthened Iran's bargaining position, and there seems to be no clear off-ramp to end the hostilities. How this conflict unfolds in the coming days is anybody's guess. What is certain, however, is that this war marks a historic turning point in the U.S.-Iran relationship, for better or worse remains to be seen.